move towards recovery, and we move cautiously and we move gradually, but we're moving in the right direction. Some detail, more Manitobans are working full-time now than were working full-time before the pandemic began. That's great news. Manitoba's unemployment rate is the second lowest in the country, and I say thanks to our small business community for their faith in our future as a province and their future as entrepreneurs too. Thank you very much to them. Because of that community, over 16,000 jobs were added in February, and I would note that 3 out of 4 of those jobs were for women. 12,000 approximately of the 16,000 jobs were female. Part-time employment is up too, and for many Manitobans, they are choosing to work part-time, up by 12,000 as well. That is more than double the national rate of increase. So all this to say that our cautious and gradual reopening plans are working, thanks to you, thanks to the willingness and the dedication of Manitobans to follow those rules and restrictions that have been part of our lives now for some months, but we hope aren't part of our lives for too many more. We've been able to bend the curve down, and as we bend that curve down, we're able to carefully restart our services and activities, get more Manitobans back to work. As a government, we've been focused on creating an environment for better economic growth, and in the years since we became government, now almost 5 years ago, we've made major improvements to our structures here in Manitoba, to reduce red tape, to lower appropriate taxes, to create a more friendly and less hostile environment for small businesses than was the case for many years. And that has positioned us well, along with the fiscal leadership that we've shown in Manitoba, to move to balance, to build up a rainy day fund. These things, you know, you don't get ready for a flood and start sandbagging when the water's right there. You get ready in advance, and that's what we did as a government, and as people in Manitoba, I know you understand how important it is to be ready. And we worked very, very hard as a government to help get us ready to be able to have the programs that I'm going to give you more detail on in a moment. I think it's important to know, yes, we are going to be running a record deficit this year. The federal government, of course, will, all provinces will. But we're able, because of the work we did, to say to you that we believe we can get through this together, and financially we'll be able to keep supporting, as we have been, those major programs that we want to support. We're leading the country as a province. We're number 1 in investing in healthcare, education, and social services. Number 1. And we're able to do that because we made the necessary changes to trim at the top of our organization, to eliminate overlap, to reduce duplication, and to save money by shopping smarter, the way Manitobans do. And because we did that, we're positioned better to come out of this COVID thing with success. The sustained reopening we're after is important. It's important to our small business people who want to get back to doing the things they do best. It's important, too, that they're able to not just open again temporarily, but that we avoid that yo-yo effect we've seen in other provinces, where we can actually stay open and continue to open and continue to make progress on an ongoing basis. En tant que gouvernement, nous nous concentrons sur la création d'un environnement qui permettra une réouverture soutenue de notre économie, afin que nos entreprises puissent rouvrir en toute sécurité et rester ouvertes. We have been, will continue to be working side by side with our business community, with our community leadership, to help them do what they do best, employ Manitobans, offer services Manitobans rely on. But we know many of them have not been able to do that, still cannot do that fully, which is why we've developed the most generous business support programs in the country, bar none. The Manitoba Bridge Grant provided, when we started it, $5,000, then $10,000, and now $15,000 in direct financial support for Manitoba businesses, nonprofits, charities that had been forced to close their doors or who had suffered as a consequence, whose demand for their business and services had been negatively impacted as a consequence of the red public health restrictions and of COVID. So the Manitoba Bridge Grant was first announced back on November the 10th to provide $5,000. In early December, we broadened the program to provide additional direct financial support to businesses that don't have a storefront, home-based businesses, for example. And as we had to continue with the public health orders, and I believe Manitobans knew why, we continued with them. We also continued to expand our bridge support to businesses to the tune of another $5,000 early in the new year, an equal second payment in direct financial support. On January the 12th, we extended the Manitoba Bridge Grant application deadline. We expanded the eligibility criteria so it would include even more small businesses that were impacted: hotels, resorts, lodges, outfitters, travel agencies, janitorial service companies, licensed owner-operators of passenger transportation businesses. And then 2 weeks ago, on March 2nd, we announced a third $5,000 bridge program, Bridging into Spring. And that payment is now, I believe, all out to deserving recipients. To date, the Manitoba Bridge Grant has supported more than 14,000 businesses across Manitoba, nonprofits, charities as well, a total of over $200 million in direct financial support. And in addition to our earlier GAP program, we're now well over $250 million of direct supports to our business community. Now, one of the silver linings of the past year, if there is one, and I think there are a few, as a result of having to stay home, many Manitobans were able to get outside and explore our province, and we were blessed with a wonderful winter to do that for the most part. For many people in Manitoba I've talked to and heard from, they say this is one of the first times they've ever gotten out and explored Winnipeg or parts of Manitoba in the wintertime. So good, something we can do again more often in the future when COVID's gone, we hope. However, our tourism industry, our hospitality industries rely not just on us, but also on people coming from outside of Manitoba. And as you know, our neighbors to the west, east, south and north were, not as able to or as mobile as they have been in the past, and not as able to come to friendly Manitoba to take advantage of all our province and our small business community has to offer. So our tourism sector, which is a key contributor to our economy, I should mention, has been significantly impacted by a reduction in domestic travel and international travel as well. I talked to the governor of North Dakota the other day, Doug Burgum, and he said he looks forward to the border opening because he knows that many North Dakotans enjoy coming up to Winnipeg, maybe for a Jets game or a Bombers game, or to enjoy the cultural amenities we have. The Assiniboine Park Zoo came up in our conversation, for example. So we're all looking forward to that time. I know many Manitobans look forward to going down south. They like to take a trip down to Grand Forks or Fargo once in a while. These are cross-border experiences we have been deprived of in the last number of months, and we understand why. But we also understand as vaccines get here, it's a hopeful time going forward. However, in the interim period, it wasn't a very good time for those who depended on that travel and that tourism. So for that reason, I am very pleased today to announce that as a government, we are investing $8 million for the creation of a new hospitality relief sector program. This program is designed to provide additional financial relief to Manitoba's accommodation and tourism sector. Aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir d'annoncer que nous investissons 8 millions de dollars pour la création d'un nouveau programme d'aide à l'hospitalité afin de fournir une aide financière au secteur de l'hébergement et du tourisme de Manitoba. The Hospitality Relief Program will be administered by the Manitoba Hotel Association with the cooperation of the Manitoba Lodges and Outfitters Association. And it'll be designed to provide supports to hotels and to full-time licensed resort tourism operators for fixed costs that have not been covered by other relief programs. While there's much hope on the horizon. We all feel it with vaccines coming here gradually. We are months away from providing Manitobans and all Canadians with the fullest protection from COVID-19. And the risks of variants are real, and they've been well chronicled. And that's why we're offering this support now during this challenging and unpredictable time. And to also, for all our businesses, position them better to rebound, so that as those numbers I mentioned earlier occurred in February and gave us such optimism, I hope that we can see continued progress in March, April, May, June, and going forward. This is the long-term recovery we are all after. These are the jobs and the opportunities for work that Manitobans who are hardworking people are counting on. And this partnership that we built, a very strong one, with our nonprofits, our charities, our business community is vital as we move forward on the road to recovery. More information on the hospitality relief sector programs and how to apply will be available in coming days. Our government remains committed to delivering the right programs at the right times to help individual Manitobans and businesses get through these challenging times. Pleased to share this information with you this morning. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our reporters on the line, you will have one preliminary and one follow-up question. Up first this morning from the Winnipeg Free Press, Carol.
Hi, Premier. You said you don't want to see a yo-yo effect with the opening and closing of businesses and services. By relaxing restrictions last week and allowing people to go maskless indoors at church and to gather in groups at outdoor patios, while variants of concerns are here and you acknowledge them and the risk of them spreading so quickly is present, aren't you inviting the yo-yo effect to happen now?
Well, we take the advice of our public health experts on this issue, Carol. I think we've moved very cautiously compared to most other jurisdictions. I note that, for example, Saskatchewan just allowed 5 households to gather maskless and get together in one household. So other jurisdictions have moved much more rapidly than us. On church attendance, for example, maskless much higher in other jurisdictions. So we're moving slowly, we're moving cautiously, we're moving carefully. But again, we're always reliant on Manitobans to follow the public health orders. Dr. Roussin has loosened, for example, you referenced churches, loosened the rules on mask wearing while sitting only in your household bubble. Of course, people who had breakfast together that morning and come to church together aren't really exposing themselves to much additional risk being in the same group. But if they get up to sing, then the potential is real. That's why the mask wearing is very critical, and church leaders we've consulted with know that for activities such as singing, anything that departs from the sitting in your bubble. These are the kinds of designed rules and moderate changes, slow-moving changes that the health leaders of our province have said we should take, and that's the advice we're going to follow.
Regarding the Education Modernization Act that was made public yesterday, after spending so much time and money on education review and consulting with Manitobans, was your government disappointed in its recommendations, and is that why the legislation doesn't heed the review's call to have elected trustees and instead replaces them with government appointees?
Well, your preamble's an error on so many things, Carol. I don't know where to begin. First of all, investing in education is perhaps the best and most important investment we can make, and we are among the leaders in the country as a government in investing in education. Unfortunately, we have known for some years that our results were less than every other jurisdiction, and so the need for reform, I think, would compel anyone who cared about education and valued it to take some action, and thoughtful action is what we're going to pursue. In respect to the recommendations, there were a great many recommendations from the panel. Of course, we're talking about education. Everyone has an opinion and everyone has a view, and I'm glad of that because we all should know that education is a top priority. But no, the recommendation wasn't to keep all elected trustees. It was to have some appointed and some elected. But upon review, we made the decision that given we were taking 80% of the responsibilities of trustees away, the negotiation, the tax setting responsibilities are the lion's share of what trustees did. They won't be doing that going forward, so there wasn't the need to keep trustees. Instead, The model is to put power down to the parent councils. Community education councils will have much more power, much more responsibility, and principals will be educational leaders now. And so parents in the community will have the ability to get feedback and response, not just from the teacher in the classroom, but from the parent at the local school. That's where the real responsibilities are, and that's the strong relationship we want to build in our education system. When a parent has a problem with their child in school, they don't go to a trustee, they don't go to a superintendent, not with great frequency. They go to a teacher. And we want to empower teachers and parents to have that relationship, and that's a big part of our strengthening of our education system going forward.
From Global News, Joe.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Premier. Question about the what tourism businesses are eligible for the grant. Would resource tourism, does that mean like outdoors? What about a business like a bowling center or an arcade that relies on tourism dollars?
Yeah, well, this is, the detail is going to be important, and that's where the Hotel Association, we've had initial discussion with them. They're going to be, along with the Lodges and Outfitters Association, they're going to be working on establishing the parameters of the program. Joe, it's similar, I'd say, to the restaurant program that we have going right now. The vast majority of those funds are already out. The hospitality industry took the leadership and decided on the criteria, and we thought they were the best position to make those detailed decisions, and we think that the Hotel Association and the Lodges and Outfitters are the best ones to make the decision on allocation. But it's an $8 million commitment to that industry. It's 11,000 people, by the way, in Manitoba that are employed by that industry. It's not a small industry. It's a big industry for our province, and very important they get the support they need.
Thank you. And as you noted, the tourism industry has been hit hard because of travel restrictions. I know you might not be able to predict what's going to happen with international travel, but what can the industry expect for interprovincial travel this summer? I know you're asked about it often, about the current restrictions we have on interprovincial travel, but are we waiting for like a certain percentage of people to be vaccinated first? If that is the answer, what percentage, like what's our target that we're waiting for?
It's a good question, Joe, and forecasting is tricky. Obviously, there's a lot of variables, variance being one. But we have that dialogue going now with a subcommittee the Deputy Premier is heading with the health experts to see if we can't give Manitobans a better picture going forward of where we may be. We don't want to create any false optimism, but we don't need over pessimism either. And that balance, striking that balance is really important. For example, with our summers in Manitoba have normally been populated by things like fairs and festivals and events like Folklorama and the Folk Festival. How can we get organized on those when we don't know what the rules are? It's difficult and challenging. That's where this dialogue and this committee of discussion has been asked to come up with some prognostications, I guess, on where we may be. One thing for sure, though, if we stick to the fundamentals, keep bending the curve down, we're going to be able to reduce restrictions sooner rather than later. And getting the vaccines here, as they're predicted to do now, later in the month and in April, will get us not over the hill, but it'll get us up the large part of the hill. And that'll be, I think, a real peace of mind for a lot of Manitobans.
From the Brandon Sun, Colin.
Morning, Mr. Premier. I was wondering if the transportation industry would be included in this hospitality program. I know that they're an integral part of the tourism industry, and I've spoken with some bus companies locally here in Brandon who have really struggled over the last year because tourism has essentially been nil.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for you. I can only tell you we did expand the bridge program to include companies that operate tourism transportation, not just taxi firms, but limo companies, things like that. So there is already a program that they can get for $15,000. But as far as whether that would fit in additionally with the hospitality or with the hotel program, I can't speak to that with assurance. We'll get an answer for you and get clarity for you here later today.
Great. No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
From CJOB, Skylar.
Hi, Mr. Premier. Thanks for the time. I just want to go back to yesterday's education review. Are you sure that this review and your actions that the government's going to take are going to address the needs of individual schools? We've heard from staff and parents that divisions were there to address the programming needs previously, so are we sure that's going to continue?
I'm a former teacher, the son of a woman who taught for over 40 years in the public education system. My sister taught for 36 years in the public education system. And we've chosen public education for our children. So I can only tell you that I, like my colleagues in the government of Manitoba, is totally dedicated to the public education system. We wouldn't make a change that wasn't for the best interests of children and their families.
Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up, flipping over to enforcement, we've noted there were a couple of fines handed out in the past week under the Federal Quarantine Act. They were for a number that there isn't a specific fine that exactly equates to that number under the Quarantine Act. So I'm just wondering, does the provincial government just group a few different fines in if people are found to have offended a couple things, and then that just results in that total?
Skylar, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to review the enforcement numbers yet this morning, so I can't give you any detail on that, but I will just go up a bit and say that the enforcement that we brought in, as I've said before, I think is really helping. I think it's helping to encourage people. I think sometimes, unless it hits you in the pocketbook, maybe there's a little bit of a more lax attitude. So I think having the fines and the enforcement that we've really stepped up over the last number of months has helped us to bend the curve. But mostly we focused on education, and I think Manitobans have really responded without the need to fine anybody. And I'm really pleased to see that Manitobans are continuing to do the right things right to get us this recovery we all want to see.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good morning, Premier. Josh Aldridge with the Winnipeg Sun. Going off of enforcement, you mentioned earlier the need for everybody to follow public health orders. On Sunday, the NDP hosted a rally in Winnipeg that drew about 100 people, which would be in breach of these health orders on gathering outdoors. To this point, there's been no fines issued or even warnings that I can find. How do you respond to this? Should this type of gathering be permitted? Should there be fines in this type of a situation?
Yeah, well, I'll leave the enforcement to the enforcers. I'll only observe that the purpose of this rally was to take sides in a labor dispute, which is kind of amateur night at the Improv when a political party decides that it's going to do that. In the old days, we used to have a negotiating table before the previous administration came in, and somebody sat on one side representing the unions. I'm a former union rep, and I understand that. I played that role at a time, a long time ago. On the other side used to be people who represented taxpayers and ratepayers. So we have a hydro labor dispute right now. We need people on both sides of the table, but we don't need a political party on one side taking sides. That's not respectful of the negotiation process. Somebody has to stand up for the taxpayer, not everybody standing up for the other side. So there needs to be a balance, and it doesn't seem the NDP understands that. There's nothing new with Wabkanu. These are the same failed approaches that the previous government took that saw our deficits escalate and rise to almost $1 billion. And we can't run a province like that. We're not going to run a province like that. We're going to respect the negotiation process. Both sides of the table need to be respected, not just one.
Should MLAs be held to a higher regard when it comes to abiding by health orders, though, regardless of whether enforcement is involved in the process right now in this particular situation or not? Should MLAs and party leaders be held to this higher standard?
They should be held to exactly the same standard as everybody else in the province. They're not a special privileged class. But this is what happens when the NDP start putting themselves up above everybody else. For example, we had rules to protect people in the workplace here in government, anti-harassment rules. One of their members was found in violation of those rules. And yet Mr. Canoe said, no, we're special people. These rules don't apply to us. We're privileged people. I don't buy that. The previous NDP government covered up harassment. They said their people were not to be held to the same standard as everyone else. I don't buy that either. I have two daughters. If our daughters, they don't, but if they were working in government, I think every parent in Manitoba would agree with me that they should feel safe and protected and free of harassment all the time. Regardless of whether it's an MLA doing it or somebody else, it shouldn't matter. So the same thing with these rules. If the rules were broken, the people who broke them should be impacted. It doesn't matter to me if they're the Queen of Sheba. Doesn't make any difference. The rules should apply to everybody exactly the same, whether it's an MLA or it's not an MLA. They aren't privileged people. The NDP are acting like they're above everybody else, but they're not. And the rules should apply to all of us equally.
From CBC Radio Canada, Matthew.
Hi, Premier. My first question is why not have helped this industry on their fixed costs earlier?
Well, Matthew, everybody has challenges in every industry, and everybody had challenges with respect to things like the pandemic, reducing the traffic in their business initially. The shutdown, of course, impacted differentially because some businesses were declared essential, others not. We've eliminated that distinction now with reduced restrictions. But there's no doubt that the hospitality sector was hit very hard. The hotel industry, other parts of it, the lodges and outfitters in particular, hit very hard because they depend even, I think, more than most hotels on visitors from out of country. And so these programs are designed to assist, in addition to previous programs that we've offered to these industry participants, to take account of the disproportionate negative impact that COVID has had on them.
And my other question, it's about the vaccine. With the Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson's vaccine available in Canada, is your deal with Providence still a good deal for Manitobans?
Well, it's a good deal for Manitobans in the future. It was never designed to solve today's problem. Best time to have solved the problem of domestic vaccine might have been about 3 years ago. We're not going to solve that problem with Providence this year, but with boosters and the potential for an additional pandemic, having additional domestic research and manufacturing capacity is a great idea. Great announcement. You may have read in yesterday's Globe and Mail a report announcing Minister Champagne, the federal government was announcing a federal investment in Emergent, which is a Winnipeg-based manufacturing facility that has partnered previously with Provident, which is the research specialist, if I can call them that. This additional federal investment in the manufacturing capacity will assist us in having more vaccines available here in Canada going forward. And if if we helped in Manitoba to light a fire with the federal government a little bit, that's a good thing, and I think we have. So going forward, these are good developments, and I congratulate the federal government on this decision because we have already seen the hurt and the lives that have been negatively impacted by the delays. We're behind dozens and dozens and dozens of other countries on getting vaccines out to people, and it's a reality. But learning from that and making sure that doesn't happen again is a very, very important thing.
From CBC Manitoba, Ian.
Good morning, Premier. Ian Frey, CBC. Why can't hospitality businesses use this relief money as they see fit? For example, employee wages.
I think they can, Ian. Like the previous programs, for example, all just transfer the funds to the company. They can use them as they wish. In addition, I would say previously, and we may come out with another variation of this, we did offer a wage support program which allowed industries in this sector and others as well to get up to a 50% assist for a period of time of up to $5,000 maximum per employee to offset up to 50% of their wage costs. So we have had, and we will likely continue to have, that's under discussion right now, additional programs to support businesses on their employment costs. But we have also made available thus far $21,000 to companies that they could use for any purpose they determined they might like to. This $8 million I'm announcing today is in addition to those programs.
Okay. This isn't my question, but the relief explains it's fixed costs that haven't been covered by other relief programs. Now to my follow-up question. On education, the government has estimated $40 million in savings. Surely then there is, at least some idea of how many jobs will be lost, how much severance may have to be paid. So I ask then, I guess, how many jobs, even roughly, will be lost by these changes?
Yeah, I asked the same question this morning. I read the initial proposal and review, but I want to make sure there aren't changes to it before I give you a number, Ian. You can understand that. But I would make this point. The human resource strategy that we'll be using will make sure that all frontline workers, I'm talking about administrative staff, for example, janitorial, cleaning staff, will be able, and that would be, for example, because we're going to be closing some of the buildings, right? Some of the, with the amalgamation, some of the school division offices, just as an example. We're not closing any schools, but school division offices wouldn't need cleaning because they won't be operating as school division offices anymore. That impact on those staff will be addressed by making sure that they get first option on government jobs in their region that come available, that are in their skill set, of course. So this is to make sure that we do everything we can to help folks not have to leave their region, their community, but that they're able to get the work that they would like to keep having if they're impacted. We understand there will be impacts because, of course, there is a lot of top heaviness in our education system. It's one of the most expensive to administer in the country. It's almost 50% more costly at the administrative level than the province of Ontario by comparison. And so those savings that we're going to create are going to go to the front line of education to help our children, our teachers, and our students in our schools.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Oh, hi, Premier. I see the sector-specific aid today. I'm wondering if you're looking at other sectors for specific programs, ones that might be more impacted by the public health orders, such as restaurants who need to operate normally close to 100% capacity to make a profit, or, concert venues and those sorts of venues that still to this day remain closed.
Yeah, Steve, as you know, I think we already announced previously a restaurant program, $5 million. We may have more to say on that in the not too distant future. That's administered by the Restaurants Association themselves. So that money has been flowing out to those impacted food services companies, if I can call them that. We've also done other things to assist, allowing liquor delivery, which was not allowed pre-COVID for licensed facilities to be done, and other measures we've taken specifically to assist that sector because it's been hard hit. With the rules gradually changing, the restrictions gradually changing, we're seeing now more facilities come back on stream. I was pleased to see, well, of course, with the weather we've been having, it's good for people like you who like to run outside, and it's good for people who like to have a patio beer. And so we're seeing more of the patios starting. I'm pleased to hear that the city of Winnipeg is talking about not introducing additional fees that would be punitive to that industry. So there are a number of other measures like that we've taken in the past, and we're looking at even more. Remember that we have a proposal in development to do about $50 million of additional investment for hard-hit sectors of our economy that we'll have more to say on in the distant future, not too distant future.
Okay, and a question on yesterday's announcement about education reform. Given that the report recommended maintaining partial elected school trustees, and you've explained earlier why you did not, I'm wondering how you respond to criticism that says, by removing elected school trustees in the community and having the big decisions made by a central body appointed by government, that in essence it's removed that democratic aspect of the school system and removed it from communities and placed it more centrally.
Well, I'd respond to that this way. Did we vote for our doctor? Do we vote for our dentist? Do we vote about the store we go to shop? Well, we choose our services with the best interests of our children and our families in mind, and that's exactly what we have the right to do in Manitoba with our schools. So the front line is where the accountability lies. And if you ask parents, and I have, they'll tell you they don't go to school trustees and superintendents. When they have a problem with their child, they go straight to the teacher. And that teacher is the level of accountability that they expect to get. And if they have a problem with the teacher, they go to the principal or the vice principal. They don't go up to the top of the system. They go to the local place. That's going to continue. What's going to work better with this system is that we're empowering principals. We're empowering educational leadership. And we're empowering the school community councils to have way more power and influence than they've had in the past. So strengthening that base is where democracy works. It isn't, like, very few people know who a trustee is. And I mean no disrespect to the trustees, because I'm friends with trustees. I have caucus members who worked for years as trustees. We are a caucus and a cabinet made up of former teachers and school trustees. So it's not disrespectful to say we don't need trustees now, because there's not going to be the need for bargaining, because we're going to centralize the bargaining so that teachers don't have to spend their time out of class going and negotiating with trustees on their wages in dozens of different school divisions. And secondly, the tax setting on education tax will no longer be done at the local level. And we're about the last province to change this. Everybody else has done this years ago. So we don't need school trustees for those purposes. So, you know, keeping school trustees to train them to become city councillors in Winnipeg or MLAs is not a smart use of money. We'll take the millions of dollars that we'll save, we'll move it to the schools, to the teachers, and to the children on the front line. That way, our system will work better for our kids. Look, if the solution to having a better education system was more trustees and more superintendents, we're already doing that, and we're last. There's got to be a better way to do things, and I think the better way is to empower our teachers and empower our families, and that's what this system will do.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Premier. Jeff Keel, CTV Winnipeg. I'm just, I have a question about this the parent council.
Sure.
Are they going to have decision-making authority, or will they just be an advisory group? And will they have public meetings like school boards so media, public, and parents can attend and see what the decision-making process is?
Both those things. I'll just quickly summarize some of the additional powers and augmented powers, increased powers of the community councils over the present parent council structure. The whole idea here is to have the school community councils support the community that they serve. They will be responsible for assessing the effectiveness of programming at the school. They will analyze the student achievement learning outcomes. They'll determine areas of focused improvement. The principal must be accountable to them, must attend their meetings. The meetings will be open to the public. The need to evaluate the performance of any person employed at that school will be within the powers now of advisory powers of the community councils. Capital construction projects, when they're proposed at the school site, they'll get to overview those. They'll get to see the proposed annual budget. They'll get to see the monthly expenditures. On changes in school programming activities, the community councils will have a role to play there, a significant role. Transportation of students, the use of suspensions and expulsions as disciplinary tools. They get to have input into that. Policies implemented at the school. And most importantly, encouraging the involvement of parents in the education of children by expanding the involvement of other parents in the parent councils.
Thank you for that. I just have another question from our health reporter, if I could, Mr. Premier. There's obviously diabetes is a problem in our province, and there's a group calling for blood sugar sensors to be covered by the province. Is this something under consideration?
Yeah, I believe that Heather Stephenson, our health minister, has actually already done some consulting on a number of these issues, that one included. And I know that she's excited with this new portfolio she's undertaken. It's not a small job, and I thank her for taking it on. So we'll look forward to seeing if there's more to say on that in the not too distant future.
From CityNews, Mike.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Premier. This is Mike Albanese with City News. You kind of answered this question already, but I'll ask it again. Much as the Bridge grant has expanded from 5,000 to 15,000 over time, if variants of concerns become more of an issue that postpones the return of normal life, is there room to expand the hospitality relief sector program as well, or should they be prepared to deal with this $8 million for the foreseeable future?
Well, I don't like being pessimistic, Mike, but I want people to know that because of the preparatory work we did, we put significant hundreds of millions of dollars away in a rainy day fund to get ready for, well, we didn't know it was going to be a pandemic, let's be honest about it, but to get ready for a rainy day. While the previous government was running up deficits higher and higher and drawing out the rainy day fund, we actually restored it. So now we have the ability to help. And so I will say, should things get bad, which we hope they won't, we have additional fiscal capacity that we wouldn't have had without the preparatory work we've done, so that we can further strengthen our supports for people and for small businesses as well.
And then just touching on what you said there, with more variants of concerns announced, I'm sure you've spoken with Dr. Roussin about the increased risk of this becoming the dominant strain and what that means for Manitoba, for people in general. Has any of that changed your viewpoint on life returning to normal this year for Manitobans?
It's reaffirmed what I previously believed and what I've said, I think, to you numerous times. We got to stay on guard. We've got to keep playing defense. This isn't a sprint. I've said it so many times, but it's true. It's a marathon. And so we don't know, for example, Mike, if we can get a vaccination. When we'll get the vaccination. When we get the vaccination, we won't know for sure that we can't give COVID to somebody else, even though we ourselves might be protected, which means that we've got to be very, very careful and considerate of other people, because not everybody's getting the vaccine the same week, right? It's going to fan out over a period of time. Even when we all get it, if we all get it and we get this so-called herd immunity, we don't know how long the vaccine's going to work. That's why we've been pushing for more domestic production. I don't ever want to see Canada or Manitobans stuck behind the line again going forward. So when we're going to need vaccines again is a question. We don't know. The science is in its infancy on the efficacy of the vaccine. Each one of the companies that's developed them has subjected them to some testing, but now the real world will intervene and we'll know whether they work and for how long they work. We know that they work, but the question is, for how long will they work? All this long diatribe is to say, got to stay on guard, got to be careful, because we don't want a return of COVID, because we don't want to go back to shutdowns and people not being able to enjoy Christmas together and things like that ever again.
Our final reporter this morning, Mr. Premier, from CHVN, Taylor.
Good morning. Going back to education, particularly those parent councils, as you said, it's much more responsibility on parents, but not all families are a two-parent household. Many shift work at varying hours, especially in lower-income neighborhoods. Now, considering this and everything else already on a parent's plate, how will this parent council model be equitable to all schools?
Well, equitable is the goal. Right now we have a system where rich school divisions can do way better programming and have more resources for their kids than poorer ones. We're going to deal with that. And this is why this centralized authority in terms of educational funding and so on is going to work way better for families who, like the family I grew up in, face some financial challenges, to put it that way. But parental involvement needs to be encouraged, in particular in single-parent families. It's an important issue. And so with the school community councils having more power, they'll draw, I think, more opportunities for parents to get involved in a meaningful way. It isn't, I'm not belittling the parent councils, but my wife was involved with the parent council for many years. Their largest project was a school swing set, right? They didn't have as much input as these community councils will have on the educational needs of children. So we're going to have a really good opportunity for parents to be more involved, and I know the community council vehicle will give parents an opportunity to be involved, even though they have numerous other responsibilities. Look, when I was growing up, it was a farm family, and my dad was busy a lot, and he couldn't go to the school all the time, and my mom was a career woman before that was common, and she was a teacher. But they always made sure that we knew that when we had homework, it was done. And that when school was on, we were there, unless we were, measles, mumps, and the usual stuff. So parental leadership is really critical. We all know this. Teachers all know this. And so the opportunity to have more parental involvement is not a small thing. In an age as demanding as this one is, we also have to remember that education for children is the top priority to help them find their potential. And my belief is that these reforms will really assist in making sure that that potential is found in our children.
And how will these councils be monitored and assessed?
Well, the principal is responsible for establishing them. We're making them, as is the case in over half the provinces, I'm told they'll be mandatory. So it's the principal's obligation as the school educational leader to make sure that that tool for families and community is built. And that in that way, then establishing more work for the principal, more accountability as well for the educational leader. A teacher rep will also be involved so that they will have direct connection to a staff representative and an educational leader representative in the form of the principal or a designate. What this will mean is that parent councils will have a direct line of influence in that school, access to information, which is powerful, and access to input on decision making, which is also powerful. These are a much stronger version. I wouldn't want to say supersized parent councils because it's even bigger than that, because they will have much more influence and the opportunity to learn much more and therefore contribute much more to the educational well-being of their children than has been the case in the past. I'll wind up by just saying this past weekend was a beautiful weekend to be outdoors, and it was great to see so many Manitobans out there walking their dog, riding their bikes, lots of joggers at the park, catching up with neighbors safely, even enjoying a beverage outside. It was great to see. But as we approach the spring break and Easter and Passover and those opportunities prevail, I have to remind Manitobans of what happened last year. And what happened last year was at Thanksgiving, we hadn't had even a first wave of any great degree. And we caused a second wave. We caused it. Manitobans caused it. We caused it by not taking the restrictions seriously, by not taking distancing seriously, by gathering in close spaces, by being in confined spaces for prolonged periods, by going to the bar and sharing our droplets with each other. These things created a November to forget, but we can never forget it. We'd like to, but we can't. We lost a lot of people. November and December was a time we'd all like to have back. We can't. So we have to remember what happened, and we have to make sure it doesn't happen again this Easter and Passover season. We can let that never happen again if we're the smart people I think we are. We've learned a lot. We're different than we were. We have to prove it again, because the cavalry's not here yet, but the variants are. And so as we have this opportunity going forward to cautiously resume our lives, let's do it cautiously, and let's remember that only we can prevent COVID. The level of caution has to remain high. Wash your hands. Stay home when you or any member of your family is sick. Wear a mask. Limit your close contacts. Stay positive. Avoid close contact settings. Avoid crowded places. Avoid closed spaces. Do these things with discipline. Play defense. Be smart. Have a heart. Stay apart. Thank you.